Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our HR check-in with Anne Laguzza of the Works Consulting. My name is Christina Krishbaum. I'm the program manager from the Nonprofit Partnership, and I want to thank you so much for joining us for our check-ins and also for our regular webinars. We really look forward to bringing this information to you on a regular basis and hope that we're providing usable information for you on a regular basis as well. I want to thank our sponsor for the HR check-ins, the Josephine S. Gumbiner Foundation. Without their support, we wouldn't be able to bring these programs to you, especially not free of charge. So thank you so much to them for supporting these efforts and continuing to support the nonprofit sector in such a fantastic manner. We're in for a treat today. So we have, I say that every time, but we are, but we've also been really looking at, you know, what we need to prepare for in going back into our workspaces. And we really want to make sure that we have intentional planning for all of you. So not only today, but also in a couple of weeks, we have a great topics that we're putting together for you as well. So stay tuned for that. But for now, I want to toss things over to Anne Laguzza with our Getting Reacquainted with Harassment and Discrimination Laws. Hopefully we haven't strayed too far from them, but it's a great chance for us to refresh our knowledge on this and see what new things we need to be putting into our plans. So Anne, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Anne Laguzza. I own the Works Consulting. We have been in business for 19 years, and I personally have been in human resources and leadership development for 29 years. So obviously about 19 years ago, started my own practice, and we work with nonprofits and for-profits, but we love these check-ins. I personally just get so much out of them in terms of putting them together for you, and then the feedback, and then the questions at the end. So if you haven't joined us before, I will do a kind of a brief presentation. And then the floor is open for Q&A related to this topic or related to any topic HR related, and I will answer as many questions as I can. And just as a reminder, both the Nonprofit Partnership as well as myself have social media connections. Those links are there at the bottom of your screen, and we would greatly appreciate you following us on the various platforms so that we can continue to give you additional information even when we're not on these webinars. So again, I know Christina said this, but thank you so much for joining us today because we really appreciate it. I think I might be enjoying it as much as all of you because it's just a great way to connect with you and keep you current. So as I mentioned right before we got started, I had thought we should really do this check-in over harassment and discrimination laws and policies because there are a lot of things coming up around COVID-19. And the attorneys I work with are all bringing this up as an issue. And I'm going to talk to you about some of the issues that are coming up. And then we have a situation of current unrest that occurred in the middle of all of this, which brought this even more to light. So we'll be addressing that topic towards the end because I know a lot of people want to know, how do I talk to my staff and how do we have dialogue? And I'm going to be addressing that with you, and I'm going to give you an example of something that happened with one of my clients specifically for that. But we're going to kind of start in first and sort of, it's almost like a refresher of what you need to know and make sure you have everything in place. So I'm hoping that you do. Now, I will tell you that a couple of my slides have a lot of information on it. And the reason I did that is because I know you get these slides afterwards and you also get to watch this again. And I wanted you to have all the information. I didn't want you to be wondering where to get it. So I may not read everything to you and you're probably going to be thankful about that. But I want you also know I did it intentionally so you would have the information you need to make sure that you are doing what you need to do on your end. Okay, so with all of that, let's jump in. So I just want to remind you, we're going to do a little reminder here. So employers have to take all reasonable steps to prevent discrimination and harassment from occurring. And as I mentioned, we've got COVID-19 and we've also got recent unrest. This is actually the most important time that you have done everything you can reasonably to prevent discrimination and harassment from occurring in your workplace. And what was coming up before this past week was and we're going to talk more about that, but specifically comments and jokes and things like that with Asian employees, people who have had COVID, people who have COVID symptoms, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that. But this is, I think, going to be a huge focus area for you. And if you haven't been on my webinars before, by the way, my cat almost always makes an appearance, and I'm sorry, I've given up. I used to move her all the time, and she just keeps showing up. So just please, we're going to roll with it. So these are protected classes. These are not all of them, but these are definitely some of the most common. These are examples. All of these are areas. A protected class is a group of people that's been identified by law that cannot be treated differently, either wholly or partially, because they're of a protected class or they're not of a protected class. So the ones that I'm sort of focusing on in this webinar specifically are paying attention to that medical condition, because that's relating back to the COVID piece, race and color, which relates a little to our more current situation, national origin and ancestry, which could actually be both, and then creed. And the reason I'm bringing up creed is because that has to do with your political affiliation, like your political party affiliation. And we are in an election year. November is going to be here before we know it. I mean, I can't believe we're already in June. And I just feel that our work environments are going to be full of discussion that, although maybe even well-intended, are going to become problematic for employers. And you may find yourself having to investigate more complaints and because of this, because people are going to think, what's the big deal? I mean, if just what's the big deal about me talking about this? It's on the news. Why can't I express who I'm voting for? So those are going to be things that are going to need to be discussed. And you may be an employer who would like to promote a certain presidential candidate. And you're going to want to be very careful with that, because there are laws protecting that. And once you sort of open that door, you've got to let everybody start having discussion about who they're voting for. So we want to be very conscious in these areas. Now, every protected class is important. Please pay attention to all of them. But I think right now we've really got to zero in on those. So these should be, samples of these should be listed in, these should be listed in your harassment prevention policy. So if you do not have these listed, you want to get them listed. You're supposed to list as many of the categories as you possibly can. And then of course say any other categories as protected by law. Okay, so this should not be new to anybody on here, I hope, but I will tell you, a lot of clients said, oh, I was delaying doing the harassment prevention training. I was delaying. And then I even had someone ask me on a webinar, not this one, obviously, but a different webinar. Oh, don't you think they're just going to push that requirement again? Well, they didn't. And I don't think now is not the time to be pushing your training. So as a reminder, if you have 5 or more employees, you are required by law to train your employees. Before I go on with what that requirement looks like, I'm going to tell you right now, if you have any employees, train your employees. It is not that expensive. You can get an online program. I mean, I think the most expensive online program I've seen is $40 for 1 or 2 if you're going to buy just a few. It's going to be worth every penny. You do not want to be the employer right now that did not do training. I'm just telling you, I know everyone's got budgets, but it is going to be the best money you've ever spent. Now, the Department of Fair Employment and Housing just finally released their free training. That was part of the deal when this law came into effect, is that they would provide free training. I have not watched this myself. I am actually, it's on my to-do list for this weekend. And that's all I'm going to say since this is being recorded. But if you want additional information after I view it, please reach out to me and I will be happy to give that to you privately. But I want to watch it first before I send everybody to it. Okay, so training has to be completed for all current employees by 12. Okay, I put 12/21. Okay, people, I will correct that before I send it to you. Obviously, it was a long day. 12/31/2020. Wouldn't it be funny if it was the 21st? That would be so believable in California. By 12/31/2020, your training has to be completed for all your current employees. So that means anyone that was on your payroll as of 1/1/2020 has to be trained by 12/31/2020. Please don't wait. Do it now. If you're behind, if you were thinking you were going to start next month, do it now. Like I said, there's all sorts of online options you can use. For new hires, So anybody that you've hired this year, right? So if they weren't on your payroll as of 1/1, anybody you've hired should have been trained within 6 months of hire. So that puts us in this month. And non-supervisory employees get 1 hour. And supervisory employees have to be trained within 6 months of hire or 6 months of being promoted to a supervisor position, and they get 2 hours. And then the training has to occur every 2 years. So if you're anywhere behind on any of this, get caught up now, okay? If you hire any temporary employees, they have to be trained within the first 30 calendar days of hire or 100 of hours work, whichever occurs first. And that's if they're on your payroll. If you happen to use a temporary agency, just make sure they're doing their training. I would absolutely make sure it's in a contract somewhere that they are committing that they are doing it. And I wouldn't even I would go so far as to ask for proof that they've done the training. So I want to mention something else about mandatory harassment prevention training. It does have to be conducted by a qualified facilitator. Besides being an attorney, you do have to have a minimum of 2 years of practical experience in certain areas. So if you are an HR professional and you're 6 months in, you can't conduct this training. Now, if you would like to learn how to start conducting this training, you can actually hire a qualified facilitator like myself to sit in the room, and you can actually conduct it. And then I would be there if any questions came up that you weren't prepared to answer. And you would have to, we would have to do that. Well, obviously it would be done this year, and then we wouldn't have to do it again for 2 years, and we can work on the law there. But just so you know, the facilitator has to be qualified. It can't just be anybody. And there are some areas they have to have that 2 years of experience in, like conducting investigations or responding to complaints or advising employers and employees about harassment. So there's certain aspects of that. So if you're an HR professional and even a manager, you've been in your role for 2 years, and that is like a big part of your job, you may meet the requirements. So that's something you can look into. And if you need more information on that, as always, you can let me know. Okay, so get your training done, by the way, and and you do it now. That's just what I'm going to say about that. I also just want to mention that I think that now would be a great time to sit down with your supervisors again and do like a brief refresher. We don't have to go through 2 hours, but let's talk about what are going to be some of the key issues right now, things we need to be paying attention to, and making sure that our environment remains harassment free. Another thing that you have to do, which a lot of people didn't realize, but you have to retain your training records. It's really important. And here's what needs to be included, right? The date of training, the name of attendees, the name of the trainer or training provider. So who provided the training, who attended it. Now, you can do individual certificates of attendance and put that all in their employee files, and that's fine. I actually prefer that because I don't want to have to go through a ton of training records to find out if someone was trained. When is this going to become a big deal? This is going to become a big deal if you get a claim of harassment or discrimination. They're going to try to figure out if you did your training per the law. And so when those situations happen, I don't want to be trying to remember what day Anne Laguzza might have attended that training. I just want to be able to go to Anne Laguzza's file, look in the training section, and there will be the harassment training certificate. If you have some way to store this online, that's okay as well, of course. What type of training was it? There should be a sign-in sheet of some kind. You know what? And I'm going to have to add to what I just said. You should do a sign-in sheet in addition to a certificate, but keep a certificate. It's so much easier to track, but then keep your sign-in sheets. Copies of the material, copies of the training, the recorded training, copies of any written questions that were received. If you did that, you might not have received any written responses, but if you did that, and then any certificates that are provided. So whatever you do, you want to keep good track of it, but you definitely want to make sure you know who attended, the date of the training, who provided that training. It's so important. And have like a copy of the presentation or something like that to prove that this was a training they went to. Okay, so that's important. Okay, so this is one of the really lengthy slides here. You're going to see there's 3 of them. I just want to make sure, I am sure all of you have a harassment prevention policy because I know you're amazing organizations like that. please read through it. If you have not read through it in the last 6 months, I want you to read through it. I want you to make sure it's complete. I want you to make sure it's current and that it represents exactly what you're going to do. These are all the requirements, okay? And like you'll see, it has to be in writing. Of course it does. We have to list the current protected categories covered under the Act, and the Act is the law. And that refers back to my slide of protected classes. You know, making sure that we talk about prohibiting any harassment from those third parties. So you can read through this and make sure that your policy is in compliance. I want to point out number 4 for a moment. If your policy currently says right now, report harassment to any supervisor or to human resources or to the executive director, you better very well make sure with documentation that your supervisors are trained on exactly what to do when they get a complaint, exactly what to do, because supervisors are the #1 weak link, and they do not mean to be, but they get busy, they minimize complaints. They say things like, I don't really see it that way. Gosh, you know, I don't know. I don't really see it that way, or that's not my experience of that person, because it's hard to remain objective when the feedback is about perhaps one of your best employees. And so, or not so good employee, it's hard to remain objective. But I prefer a harassment policy that bypasses the supervisor for complaint and says, come directly to human resources manager or the executive director, or come to, you know, the human resources manager, the CFO, or the executive director. If you have 3 top level people, that would be ideal. I prefer that rather than go to any supervisor. If you're a smaller organization and you maybe only sort of have some supervisors and an executive director to go to, and you're like, well, if every complaint comes to the executive director, an employee might feel stuck because you don't ever want them to feel like they have nowhere to go. Then maybe you designate one supervisor as your person who's available for employee relations complaints of this type, in addition to the executive director, and you train that person on exactly what to do, because it's very important to know what to do with the complaint, and the speed at which you respond is going to be very important. Okay, so I cannot stress that complaint procedure enough. I'm going to tell you, I went through a unfortunate lawsuit with a nonprofit. They called me to sort of help them through it. And what saved them in the end from paying about $200,000 in settlement down to $85,000 in settlement, which, by the way, I know is still a big settlement, but in fact, this person was getting harassed. So that was not the dispute. The dispute was over how they did not handle the complaint well when it was made, was the fact that their complaint procedure was written so clearly that they were able to demonstrate that when the employee complained following the right procedure, the organization reacted like that. But originally, she didn't complain to the right person. She complained to someone that she thought was a supervisor, that wasn't actually a supervisor, because they seemed like they were in a supervisory capacity to her. So that was the problem. And that person minimized her complaint, tried to handle it sort of under the table, if you will, and didn't bring it forward. So when the complaint escalated, that employee then went to human resources, which is their first step in the policy. And then the organization jumped on it, did a very fast investigation, actually terminated the person who was allegedly harassing, and she still did sue. So I cannot stress enough how important it is to be clear. So I know sometimes we're trying to make it, well, we want them to go to anybody, we want them to feel, totally comfortable. Well, yes, we want them to feel totally comfortable, but you can make people feel comfortable with 2 or 3 people to go to. If any of you have them complain to the board chair or the board personnel committee, something like that, you have to give them the way to contact that person. That the way to contact that person can't be that now I have to go to HR or to the executive director to get that information, because the fear will be that I won't do that because I'm afraid I might get retaliated against. And the executive director may even do that, not even intentionally. They might say, well, why do you need to call the board chair? And then the employee's like, well, I'm having a problem with you, and then that gets uncomfortable, right? So if you're going to make the board chair, or if you have a personnel committee or something like that as one of the people they can contact, be sure that they have that contact information in your policy. And I know your board chairs change, put it in there every time it changes, update your policy and redistribute it. Okay, so this goes on and continues to tell you how to, what you need to have exactly in your policy. We want to make sure people can make a complaint. You do have to tell them that they can go to the EEOC or the DFEH. That is a law that has to be in your policy. You have to give them the links to that information. And we hope they won't call. We'll hope they'll let you handle it internally, but we have to give them that information that they can go outside the organization. That is their ultimate remedy for any solution or for any issues that they're having in the workplace related to harassment or discrimination. Make sure that for number 6, that your supervisors know that the minute they get a complaint, so even though your policy will say, go to HR, let's say, a supervisor gets a complaint, which is very common, they need to know exactly what they need to do. Who do they go to immediately? Not 5 minutes later, they go immediately, okay? And then, of course, we talk about what to do when we receive allegations of misconduct, that you're gonna conduct a thorough and fair investigation, that you never guarantee confidentiality because you can't. If it was going to be confidential, it would just be me and the person that's making the complaint, and we cannot guarantee that. And what would happen potentially if someone is, if there is misconduct, what will happen? Disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment, most likely. And then, of course, the big one, number 10, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, is that they will not experience any retaliation, okay? So go back to your policies, make sure you just use these as your bullet points and look in your policy, check off every single one of these and make sure you have it. You can add more, but you at least want to have this, okay? So make sure. One of the things I'm starting to add in policies is the fact that we are training employees, that employees are required to get trained every 2 years for an hour, and that supervisors are required to get trained every 2 years. Every 2 years for 2 hours. And remember, that's the minimum. Okay, so you could always do more. Okay, so retaliation is absolutely prohibited. This is a great time as you're bringing people back to the workplace, or even if you're going to keep them remote, to talk about what is retaliation. So here's some examples. We stopped talking to an employee. I heard that they have COVID-19 or they had it and I don't want to get near them, even with a social distancing. We're going to maybe be in a conference room, or I don't want to work near them. Some of my clients are essential service providers and they're still working. Even though they shouldn't know who had it, a lot of times that gets out or that employee talks about it. They tell other people to stay away from those employees. Stay away from them. You might get sick. I heard they're not wearing a mask. I heard they're doing this. I heard, or I heard they are wearing a mask. I mean, just all of these little comments, and there will be joking. There will be joking about race. Hopefully not with everything that's going on, but I've already heard it. I've already had complaints about this in the workplace. And then another retaliation that's prohibited, I want to remind you, is your employees using the FFCRA, so that paid sick leave for applicable absences. We can't retaliate against them for requesting time off that they are eligible for. Again, I'm hoping this is all just a reminder for you, but I bring it up, and the way these topics become kind of important to talk about is I base it off my practice and what people are calling me about. So I've had more people tell me that they either didn't inform their employees that they were eligible for paid leave, or they don't want to give it to them. So we've got to do that, okay? And attorneys are pretty confident this is going to be the area that's on the rise, the retaliation that employees are going to experience in the workplace. So we want to be very, very aware of that. So how do you distribute the policy to employees? Well, you have a lot of different methods, and I will let you go through those, but it's basically, you can print it, you can email it, you can have it on your internet with a link. At the end of the day, I'm going to tell you, have an acknowledgement form that they sign, that they received your policy, that it's their responsibility to read it and follow it, and that if they violate that policy, there will be disciplinary action up to and including termination of employment. So be very clear on that. And I'm going to tell you that you should distribute this policy now. I know you might have already done it. You did it with the handbook release in January. I don't even care if you did it 2 months ago. Now, if you didn't do it last week, you're going to do it now. Redistribute your harassment policy to everyone. Tell them that it's just time to do a reminder. Get a new acknowledgement form from everyone. Make it a topic at a staff meeting for discussion. make it a topic at department meetings, however large your organization is, but this should be talked about. You should remind everybody you have a policy and exactly what happens if they violate it, and give them examples. When you say to them jokes, give them examples. It doesn't mean I don't want you to give a joke that would offend somebody, but you would say, you know, jokes about race or jokes about religion or jokes about someone's age. Include all categories, but you need to address it and remind them about the political piece, the creed portion, because a lot of people don't even realize that that's a protected category. So get an acknowledgement form and do it now. That's what I'm going to tell you. It's so important that you do this. And quite honestly, I think you should release your policy. Been saying that for the entire time I've been on my own for a 9th school year, whatever is a better reminder for you. Redistribute the policy and have everybody sign it. I don't care if you have 5 employees or, you know, 1,000 employees. It's important enough to get it done and to get an acknowledgement, to keep it in front of your employees. It's important to us. We are taking this seriously. This isn't just something we were told to do by some HR consultant and we never, ever, ever, ever talk about it again. When I do an HR audit and I see that someone signed their handbook, you know, 2 years ago, or this policy 2 years ago, and they haven't gotten a new policy, I'm always like, that's a big mistake. I mean, you should definitely be doing it as part of your harassment training. But in addition to that, I would do it every year. You're never going to get in trouble for informing people too much about this. Okay, so as part of your return to work, you're going to redistribute your harassment prevention policy, obtain a new acknowledgement form, and part of your training. Now, I'm saying return to work because I know a lot of people are returning to work, but if you're going to continue on as is right now and you're continuing to allow people to work remotely, I'm fine with that. Send out the policy and get it signed. Electronic signatures are fine, but get it signed and store it in their employee file, wherever that is for you. I also want to make sure that you have to have a poster up that's called the California Law Prohibits Workplace Discrimination and Harassment and Transgender Rights in the Workplace. So some people have been asking me this. They're like, but we're remote. How am I making sure they have posters? Every single poster is available online for free. Okay, so that big poster that many of you have somewhere in a break room, if you don't get it, you can get that for free, all those posters for free, that you get them in individuals. You can put that into a shared drive. You can put it into like a Google Drive. You can PDF all of them and send it out electronically, but all of your employees should have access to it. If you have an intranet system or your payroll has a way to put some of this information on there, you can definitely put it on there. Okay, I am gonna move my cat now. She's a little excited today. Okay. So, but yeah, so you should make sure everybody has access to that. Even though they're working out of the office right now, a lot of people have forgotten about their posters. Those are big fines for not having those in place. So you want to make sure you do that. Okay, ensure that every supervisor takes those complaints seriously and they're not ignored and reporting is not delayed or minimized. As I mentioned, your supervisors are the weakest link. Typically, I'm not saying yours are, but typically they're the weakest link. And it's not intentional, just their job is busy, or it's about, a complaint comes in about an employee that they're like, I can't afford to lose this person. So if I look into this and it's true, I might have to terminate employment. I don't want to do that. So it's really important that they're trained. And here's something I want everyone to hear. There is no such thing as a formal complaint. Okay, I should say there is a formal complaint, but I'm going to tell you why I say it like that. I will have a complaint of harassment or discrimination that doesn't get handled, and then it escalates, and then that's when my clients call me. And I start talking about it. I'm like, why didn't you look into it the first time? And they're like, well, I didn't receive a formal complaint. A third party told me about it. Someone said they saw it. I didn't see it for myself, or I heard it, but nobody seemed bothered by it, and no one made a formal complaint. That is like non-existent in California as a reason not to investigate. There is no official Department of Fair Employment and Housing form. There's no official document. If you see it, or you hear it, or you hear about it from a third party, or you receive a direct complaint, you have to look into it. If it is meets the level of legal harassment or discrimination, so based on those protected classes, you have to investigate it. That is the law. You cannot say, well, nobody told me, so I didn't do anything about it. And I'm going to give you an example. I had a client tell me that a supervisor threw something at an employee. No lie. And they didn't look into it because it was only those two people in the room. So they heard about it from a third party. Neither one of the supervisors saw it, and these other supervisors saw it. And so they decided not to look into it. That is not how you want to handle that. I don't care how it comes to you. And there's even a bystander, training that we go over now in harassment training. You have to look into it and think about it this way. You don't want to be the person that something escalates and then you do get into a legal situation and they find out that there was a complaint earlier that or someone knew about something earlier that nobody looked into, and say, well, I didn't know, I didn't think about it. It has to be the most important thing. One of the most important things on your list has to be that my work environment needs to be a good place to work. I need people to feel respected and comfortable. And how I can do that is take every reasonable step to make sure my environment is harassment and discrimination free. And I'm going to actively pursue this. Now, that means when I hear someone make a comment, maybe someone makes a comment, this happens a lot in interviewing. You're looking at someone's resume and you're like, oh, are you Italian? That last name seems Italian. I'm going to tell you right now, if I hear anybody say that, I'm like, hey, not relevant. Like, we're not talking about that right now. And I don't care if I'm saying that in front of the candidate. I don't care if I'm saying that to the hiring supervisor. It's important to be able to send that message. If that candidate doesn't want to work for me, because the message we send is we don't joke around. We don't care where you're from here. I'm okay with that. I don't want that person to work for me. I want them to be like, oh, that was kind of cool. They sort of just stood up. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I'm happy to tell where I'm from. But, so that this is so important. I cannot stress it enough. Comments, jokes, seeing emails, seeing memes hanging up in people's cubicles. I've seen a lot of inappropriate memes. I saw this one refrigerator recently that had magnets all over it. And when I started looking at every magnet, let me tell you, they didn't all say appropriate things. So be aware. All right. Okay. So let's go over conducting an investigation. Just got a couple more slides here and then I'm open for questions for you. And I do see you guys posting questions. So thank you so much. And we'll get to those. So I just want to mention, when you do conduct an investigation, you want it to be someone who's qualified to do it. They should have been trained in how to conduct an investigation. Just a little plug for the partnership. We happen to do an investigation training. Maybe we're going to need to bring that one all on its own. It's part of the certificate program. You can actually go to it as a single class, but maybe we'll do a webinar on that because it feels like people are going to need to be very conscious of that. It has to be timely and thorough. I would like you to start an investigation after a complaint within 24 hours maximum. I do think you need some time to get your thoughts in order after receiving a complaint and put questions together. So I don't expect you to run out of your office or wherever you work and grab the first person you need to talk to. But I do think that you need to take some time to do it. All information is confidential to the extent possible. Don't ever guarantee complete confidentiality because you cannot to do a thorough investigation. You will do your best, but you can't guarantee it. Most people are worried about retaliation. So you're going to guarantee them that that is not going to be an issue for you, because if they bring that back to you, that they're being retaliated against, you're going to conduct an investigation into that. And that is a termination offense, disciplinary action up to and including termination. Determine what can and cannot be corroborated, determine your outcome, and if there is any disciplinary action. And I'm going to tell you that second to the last bullet, follow up for closure is one of the most important things you need to do an investigation. So I make a complaint and 3 or 4 days go by. I don't see anything changing. I see the person I made the complaint against seeming unaffected, and I'm wondering what's going on. Make sure you touch base with the person or persons that made the complaint pretty regularly. I usually don't let more than 2 or 3 days go by maximum. I tell them in advance when they're going to hear from me, and then I check in with them. And if I'm still needing to investigate, I let them know I have a couple more people I need to talk to, and I will get back to you. And then when I'm done, I'm going to meet back with them and conclude the investigation. You don't give them all the ins and outs of what the employment information is for that employee, that you might have taken disciplinary action, but you do tell them that you've handled things. And again, I could go on for this for a while. So I know this isn't our whole discussion today, but maybe we'll, like I said, we'll talk about bringing that back at some point. But it's the follow-up. I'm telling you, most people miss this piece. And that's where your person who makes a complaint escalates things and takes matters into their own hands because they do not feel heard or taken care of. Try to get your investigations wrapped up in 3 days or less, if at all possible. Okay, 3 business days or less, if at all possible, from the day you got their complaint. And then document the timeline and investigation. So important that you have a timeline, when you got the complaint, what you did first, who you talked to, dates, times. Keep an Excel spreadsheet. It's all that is your own document. You do not share that with anybody. And then make sure you keep very good investigation notes. If this complaint ever escalates, you're not going to get asked tomorrow about the investigation when you would probably have a good recollection. You're going to get asked the details 6 months to a year from now. And if you have notes that you can't interpret, or you were not good at taking notes, you're going to have a really hard time with that. You've got to take very good notes, but those need to be protected under your attorney-client privilege, and those are not shared with anybody. Those notes are the company owned. Okay, so one of the things we were kind of in the beginning talking about is our current situation that we're in right now. We have current unrest, right? And people are wanting to talk about it. We need to talk to our employees. We don't want to appear that we're not conscious or that we're not aware. Now, the story I have for you is I had a leader thought that maybe, oh, you know what, this is so important. I think it was like Monday last week or so, or Tuesday. This is so important. I'm going to bring my team together on Zoom and we're going to have a discussion. And it's so important. I'm just going to let people talk. It's going to be good for them to air their concerns. And this will be great. You probably already know that great is not where this conversation ended. It escalated quickly to a level where the leader was not qualified or prepared to have the discussion. And they had people clicking out of the Zoom meeting, like basically hanging up, saying, this is unbelievable, like I'm out of here. People had all different feelings about protesting and not protesting. And I'm just going to tell you right now that I respect that you might want to have the conversation completely. And I think you probably should. But I want you to make sure you get a skilled facilitator to help you with that, unless you are that skilled facilitator. And I don't mean I'm a great facilitator. I am not skilled at leading these discussions, which is why I'm not leading this discussion today. I would hire a skilled facilitator in these types of matters to make sure that we are making sure people are heard, that the discussion is productive, and that we are doing it in the right way. So please don't do it alone. Phone a friend, make sure you connect with someone who is trained in this. Now, of course, I know an organization in Long Beach that many of you know, CCEJ, has been a great resource for our company. You use whatever organization you want, but make sure you get support. Please don't start assigning books for people to read. Don't send out YouTube videos. Don't tell them accounts to follow on IG. Please contact someone who can help you first. And you can say, you know what I'd like to do for my group? I'd like to talk to them about some books. Can you help me with resources? I'd like to lead a discussion. Can you come and lead a discussion? Whatever it is you're looking for, you can ask for support, but please get it. It's just so important. I do not want you to have a breakdown in your team that is something that cannot be repaired, and that will further kind of erode everyone's trust and confidence in your workplace. And this is a perfect moment where our personal world, if you will, is absolutely affecting our professional world, and we have to be very careful. And so your intention is great. Take that next step, spend the time, money if it costs money, and make sure you have someone professional involved. Okay, so don't try to just talk it out. You may really be minimizing what's actually going on for people. So with that, I am opening it up for questions, and I will go up and answer the ones we have. And if you have any, please feel free to ask them now. Sue Ann, you asked about mental illness. If you're asking if that's a protected category, it absolutely is. It's absolutely protected. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's what you meant, but by all means, clarify if that's not what you meant. How do we deal with sexual harassment policies and volunteers? We've never had a complaint, but the majority of our human resources is composed of volunteers. Should we have a general policy for volunteers? Absolutely. I think you should have a policy for volunteers that they sign. You know, you can probably pretty much use the same policy, except make sure to change all the words to volunteers. And then they're not going to get disciplinary action up to including termination. Your volunteership terminated. If you harass somebody, you're gone. You're done. Now, I would still look into it because you have to by law. But if we find out you're harassing someone, we're done. You can find another volunteer. And that includes board members. By the way, you should have training for your board. I mean, I've done plenty of board training, but you should. Your board should. If you wanted them to go through the webinar, you should put them through the 2-hour training. That's important for them to understand, and they should sign a policy. I'm a board chair and I haven't signed a policy yet, but now I'm thinking I got to get on that. But really, everybody should. And then your contractors. So I have a contract, right? You should have something that you give me that's about harassment. And it's same thing with contractors. If you, I mean, personally, I would have zero tolerance. If it's like you're harassing someone in my workplace, we're done. Like, I'm not messing around with that. I'll find somebody else. You do not have the time, energy, or resources for these people that are not employees to be causing problems in your workplace, in my opinion. I'm a little bit opinionated about that one for sure. Okay, Richard, I'm going to get back to you on that. I don't have any idea about that. Richard's asking for a very specific policy. So Richard, if you remember to email me, I'll see what I can find for you. And then I have a non-related question that's come up, non-related to our topic, but still HR related. But if a staff moves from coordinator to manager, is there a rule when they have to move from non-exempt to exempt? Every employee can be non-exempt. And you have to qualify for exempt status, and there's both a salary test and a duties test. And so I would, personally, everyone can be non-exempt. So there's nothing wrong with being exempt, non-exempt, I'm sorry, doesn't matter what your title is. So if you're gonna move them to exempt, you wanna make sure you do it correctly. Okay, so if there are any other questions, I think that actually wraps us up. So I'm happy if you guys are thinking of anything right now. I can definitely give it a few minutes. I'm sure Christina's going to pop in here.
Hey.
I know, Christina, we talked about something that I want to mention.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's also not related to this, but here's a good reminder that Christina and I talked about. Any of you have a remote workforce right now that is working in a county different than your county, you have to make sure that you're paying them the appropriate minimum wage and providing them the appropriate sick leave, because that is not based on your work. It is based on your workplace when they work in your office, but if you've moved them out, so like LA City has its own sick leave ordinance as well as their own minimum wage. San Francisco, I know that doesn't apply here probably, but does as well. San Diego does as well. So you need to make sure that you've checked on that. Where do your employees live? Where are they working? And if you are out of compliance right now, you're going to want to get in compliance. There are some rules about how many hours, but if they've been working remotely this whole time, they're probably eligible. So definitely check in on that. And I thought that was a great point. Christina brought that up. And I was like, you know, I knew that existed, but we'd never mentioned it here.
There's just so much to track. There's so much.
I know, and everybody was so worried about the COVID part, which I understand. And so if if you're out of compliance, just get in compliance, make it right. You know, go back and provide your employees what they're owed.
And I know that if we do just have a few more minutes, and I wanted to actually give a couple of announcements to those that are still with us on the call. In light of all that has been occurring, TNP has been seeking out experts to help with dialogue and conversations. So we very much take heart, even Anne's recommendation in here, if you're going to have these conversations, invite someone else in. Absolutely. We do not occupy that space, and we absolutely yield the floor to those who better occupy that space. So in light of that, TNP is actually planning a couple of different things. So one that we were working on before the civil unrest occurred was actually holding conversations that are more workshop style on how you can help yourself and also your teams with the struggles of dealing with COVID and with this pandemic, and also with re-engaging as teams and moving back into the workspace. So we're actually looking to host a series of 4 different workshops, and they will be workshops, not webinar format, so that you can have more engagement and conversational styles. One of those workshops will be exclusive for executive directors, and the rest will be open up to anybody who's interested in attending those sessions. But we are going to cap those at probably about 20 to 25 people per workshop, so that way we can have honest dialogue, open dialogue, confidential, safe spaces to share out some of our thoughts. On the other end, the other spectrum, on sort of the civil rights issue and unrest that's been occurring, we are looking to host out a different session. And this will actually take place. I'm coordinating it right now, so this is more like in the midst of being arranged. So look for an email hopefully later today or on Monday about this. But we're hoping to host this on Thursday, this coming Thursday, and with the executive director from CCEJ. So Rena has agreed to help facilitate this conversation. But again, this one will be exclusive for executive directors on how to have some of this open dialogue conversations, and understanding your space in that, and then also how to help out with your teams. So that's mostly what we're looking at and planning for those. Stay tuned for some more updates coming your way on all of that. And we also are looking at hosting our next HR check-in, I believe, in 2 weeks. Is that correct, Anne?
Yes, we are. We're going to do it in 2 weeks, and we will try to get the announcement out a little sooner too, so you all can.
And we really do watch the trends. So if you have up-to-date kind of issue that you're like, I really would love to see this covered in one of those check-ins, or I'd love Anne's take on it, which I know that comes up for us a lot, then please email us and let us know, info@tmpsocal.org. Give us a heads up. Let us know if there's something that we can answer right away, then we'll send that information to you if we've already covered it. But if we haven't, just like today, I was kind of sending Anne some, some messages before, like, hey, maybe we can cover this part. It's something I learned and something new. So we're just looking at really being responsive to your needs. And that's part of why our topic for 2 weeks from now, we have a couple ideas, but we're holding off until we really get a sense of things may shift. And so we know that things have shifted, gosh, on a daily basis for a lot of us. And so we want to make sure that we are staying on top of the trends for those. So without further ado, I don't think that we have any further questions that are pending in the Q&A. Anne, any last minute suggestions, thoughts, or?
I guess I want to say thank you, of course, per usual. And I just want all of you to make sure you take a couple minutes for yourself this weekend. It's so important. I know somebody at the beginning said they're going to try to take a day in their backyard. And I think everybody needs a little bit of I always say, even if it's 30 minutes, take 30 minutes to yourself sometime this weekend.
Fantastic idea. And if longer, please do longer. I mean, hey, even it's like icing, it'd be incredible. And I would also suggest too, and Anne did mention it, but if you follow her on social media, follow TMP on social media, she puts out incredible information, newsletter wise. I get a lot of great tips and tricks from her social media. So please follow us on there. And until next time, I think we're all set. Oh, maybe one more Q&A, and that might be it. Thank you. As always, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. This video will be going up soon. I'm going to process it as soon as I can. So you'll get that in email, and then you can also find it on TMP's website as well as our YouTube channel. And without further ado, I think that's it. Everybody have a wonderful weekend. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Anne, again. And thank you again to the Josephine S. Gumbiner Foundation for sponsoring these check-ins. We really appreciate it. Have a great weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.